I love mechanical keyboards, and over the years I've modeled a few of them in Blender. One of the biggest challenges has always been the RGB shining through the keycaps realistically. There are plenty of shortcuts and workarounds out there, but I don't like cutting corners. So today I'm going to show you how to model a shine through keycap in Blender just like how they work in real life. We'll be focusing on a single key, which is the escape key in this case, because on my own keyboard it's orange and I really like that. I'll also show you how to animate the RGB so it smoothly cycles through colors. So without wasting any more time, let's just jump into it. So I'm starting with a fresh blend file, and I've added this little section here so you can see me, and I'm just gonna go ahead and add a cube here and also turn on this add-on so you can see my keystrokes and make this smaller. Let's turn on edge length and also change the unit to millimeters. Make this smaller and smaller. Now, to model the keycap accurately, we need a reference photo. Actually, we need a few reference photos. So here's the first reference photo, and as you can see, a 1U keycap is 18mm by 18mm, and the escape key is on the R4 row. So we're going to use this to actually model our keycap. So let's make our cube a little bit smaller and hit 18mm by 18mm. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to drag and drop our reference photo into our blend file and just reset the rotation. And I can just rotate this 90 degrees along the x-axis and make this way smaller. Something like this would be fine. Let's switch to the side view. Bring this right here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. Let's change the transform pivot point to 3D cursor. So the reference photo scales from the origin of the world. I can also switch to the wireframe view so I can see what I'm doing. And let's just make the reference photo a little bit bigger and just move it in the right place. Bring it down a little bit. Now let's select our cube and select the top surface. Back to the side view. Let's bring this down. And I'm going to switch the transform pivot point back to bounding box center. And just rotate this slightly and also scale this down and move it until it matches the reference photo precisely. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select these two edges on the top and the bottom of the keycap and subdivide them by, let's say, maybe 9 cuts. And then I'm going to select the one in the middle. Now, this is where we need the second reference photo. In this reference photo, we can see that the radius of the curvature on a 1U keycap is actually 30mm. So let's go ahead and apply that. What we need here is to actually spawn a circle, and for the radius, I'm going to just give it 30mm and then rotate it by 90 degrees along the y-axis. Switch to the front view, bring this up and just make sure that it's right here on the edges of the keycap, and we can see the curvature just like this. Now let's select our keycap, hit tab into edit mode, and I'm also going to turn on the proportional editing. You can also hit O to turn it on and off. Now I'm going to hit GZ and scroll up until the circle is small enough. Let's hit escape and switch to the front view. GZ again, and let's make this circle smaller, and let's see what we can do to replicate the shape of this circle. Yep, that would be fine. Let's select these two edges and back to the front view, and let's just bring them up a little bit, and just like that we got the right curvature for our keycap. We don't need this circle anymore. Let's go ahead and delete it, and we can also add smooth shading to our keycap. Let's go ahead and delete the bottom surface of our keycap and also select the corner edges by holding Alt and Shift Alt and Shift for these corner edges, so it looks something like this. Let's hit tab back into object mode, and I'm just going to bring our reference photo here, rotate it along the x-axis and bring it up. Let's switch to the top view, and we can just put this where our reference photo is. And then back to solid view, let's select our keycap, hit tab into edit mode. We got the edges selected. Back to the top view, wireframe view, and I'm going to hit Control B and bevel the edges relative to the reference photo. Let's add something like 5 segments for this and see how it looks like. It looks pretty good. I really like this. Let's just hide this reference photo for now because we don't need it. And this will be our escape key. The next thing I'm going to do is adding a solidify modifier to our cube, and it looks, well, as you can see here, the thickness of the keycap is 0.9 millimeters. So let's go ahead and apply that to our solidify modifier. I'm also going to check even thickness. And to avoid our camera from clipping, I'm just going to go to view and change the clip start to 0.1 millimeters. Let's see. Let's go to the wireframe view and see how this does. I want to make sure that there are no intersections in our vertices here. Seem to be pretty good. Back to solid view, and I'm just gonna apply the solidify modifier. Hit tab into edit mode. We don't need edge length anymore. Let's turn that off. I'm gonna hit 1 for vertex selection and select these vertices here, and also these ones here, and these ones, and also these ones. Now I can turn off proportional editing, turn on snapping tool, and switch target to vertex, and just hit GZ and just snap them to this vertex right here. You can see that it's not really consistent, is it? No, it's not. Let's switch to the wireframe view, and we can just snap them one by one individually to these vertices right here. So GZ, and we're just going to snap them to these vertices right here, just to make sure that everything is absolutely fine. And I'm just going to speed up the video so you don't get bored. Alright, let's switch to the side view and make sure that everything's fine. Yes, this looks pretty good. The next thing I have to do is creating a mold out of our keycap. So let's go ahead and select our keycap, hit Shift D, Z, and just bring this up. And I'm going to input a number that I will remember, like let's say 50 millimeters, and it's going to be right here. Then I'm going to spawn a cube and just make this smaller, bring it up. I can turn off snapping tool. We don't need that anymore. Let's bring this up until we can see the bottom of our keycap. And I'm going to use the bool tool add-on. If you don't have that installed, it's right here. You can go to preferences and get extensions and just search for bool tool, and we can just install it right here. Easy. I'm going to select our keycap, hold shift, select the cube, and choose difference. And as you can see, it has created a mold out of our keycap. Back to our keycap, I'm going to spawn a text, and it's going to be huge, right? Yes. Let's hit tab into edit mode, and I'm going to type ESC. Let's hit tab back into object mode and just scale this down. and then bring it to the left, scale this further down. We can switch to the top view and then the wireframe view, and we have to rotate this by -90 degrees. Bring it here, make it a little smaller, and just make sure that it's in the right place. And I think this should be a little bit too big. I can change the transform pivot point to 3D cursor so it remains in the middle of our keycap. See, let's bring it up a little bit, back to the top view. Yeah, this seems about right. Let's go to our text data and geometry. Let's hit Control A and apply the scale. And I'm going to extrude this by, let's say, 10 millimeters. Wow, that's a lot. Let's extrude this by 5 millimeters, and this is looking pretty good. We want to make sure that it's sticking out from the top and also the bottom of our keycap. Now let's go to this object menu, convert, and convert our text to mesh. Now as you can see, the mesh is not very consistent and usable, so we can just go ahead and add a remesh modifier. Switch to solid view. I'm going to switch to smooth and also uncheck remove disconnected and bring this octree depth up till we get something usable. I guess 8 will be fine. And this looks pretty good. It's a very consistent and high dense mesh. Back to solid view, let's apply the remesh modifier and also duplicate our escape text like so. I'm going to select our keycap, add a boolean modifier because the bool tool add-on isn't really precise enough. So difference is already selected. Let's select this escape object. And we want this to be exact, and also let's apply the boolean modifier and delete our escape text. And as you can see, it has done a very good job of engraving the escape key. Now with our escape text selected, I'm just going to bring this down. Let's make sure that it sticks out from the bottom and the top. And I'm just going to select our mold right here, bring this down by the number that we're supposed to remember, which is 50 millimeters in this case. So minus 50 millimeters along the z-axis. So it's right where it should be. Let's switch to wireframe view, select our escape text, add a boolean modifier, and choose our mold as the object. And with that, we can just go ahead and apply the boolean modifier and delete our mold. And as you can see, this has been done perfectly and seamlessly from the bottom and the top, and it just looks beautiful. I really like this. With our escape text selected, I'm going to hold shift, select the keycap, control P, and snap object. So the text moves with the keycap. Let's continue with adding more details to our keycap. We need a stem socket right here in the middle. So let's go to our reference photo. And as you can see, the stem socket is 5.5 millimeters in diameter. So let's go ahead and spawn a cylinder. 5.5 would be 2.75 millimeters in radius. And I think 32 vertices is not enough. Let's go with 64 and also smooth shading. And this is crazy tall. So let's hit tab into edit mode, SZ, and scale this down along the z-axis. Let's hit tab back into object mode, and I'm just going to bring this down, and we can go to the side view, wireframe view, and just make sure that it's exactly in the middle. And also it doesn't stick out from here. We can also check it from the front view and just make sure that it doesn't stick out from the bottom or the top. Can bring this down a little bit. As you can see, it's colliding with our text here. So let's hit tab into edit mode, S, Shift Z, and just make this a little bit smaller so it doesn't collide with the text right here. And also let's hit tab back into edit mode, select the surface on the bottom, and just bring it up. I'm gonna hit Shift Tab, turn on snapping tool, and just snap the bottom to these vertices right here. As you can see in the reference photo, we should bring the bottom surface up by 1.3 millimeters. So with the bottom surface selected, GZ and 1.3 millimeters, that would be accurate enough. We got this cross in the middle, that is 1.26 by 4 millimeters. So let's go ahead and spawn a cube, make it smaller, and also bring it down. We can turn off snapping tool, also turn on edge length and make this smaller along the x-axis until we hit 4 millimeters, and SY scale this down until we hit 1.26 millimeters. Let's bring this up, make sure that the rescaling of the cylinder didn't impact anything, and no it didn't. I'm happy. Let's bring this down again, hit tab into edit mode. Let's change the selection tool to select box. I'm going to select these two edges and subdivide them by 2 and do the same thing on this side as well. Subdivide them by 2. Let's select our 4 of these new edges and scale them along the y-axis until we hit 1.26 millimeters. Now we need to select this surface right here and extrude it by 1.37 millimeters, and this one here as well, so 1.37 millimeters. If you wonder why 1.37 millimeters, is because we got 4 millimeters here and 1.26 millimeters of thickness here, so it'll be 4 minus 1.26 divided by 2. And with our cross selected, let's just put it in the right place, and let's make sure that we're not sticking out from the top, which we're not. And let's hold shift, select the cylinder, and hit difference in the bool tool add-on, and this is how it looks like. It looks pretty good. Now all we need to do is add these little things right here that support the stem socket. So let's spawn a cube and make this smaller and bring it to the right. Let's switch to the bottom view and make this slimmer along the x-axis. So something like this would be pretty fine. Let's bring this down. And also let's hit tab into edit mode, select this edge right here, GY, and just bring it inside. Let's make sure that it's inside of our stem socket and also the keycap. And with our object selected, let's make sure that the 3D cursor is in the middle of our cylinder and the transform pivot point is set to 3D cursor. We can just hit Shift D, R, Z, and just rotate this by 180 degrees, and do this one more time. So Shift D, R, Z, and rotate this by minus 90 degrees. As you can see, this one is sticking out, so let's select this top surface right here and bring it down. Let's make sure that it's still inside of our keycap. And let's select this edge right here, GX, and just move it inside so we do not see it from the outside, and this looks pretty good. And I'm not going to add the fourth one because it's going to interfere with everything that we're going to do. So let's select all these things that we added like so and select the keycap at the end, Control P, object, so they all move together. And with that, we're done with modeling the keycap itself. The next thing we need for our miniature keyboard is a switch. And I'm not going to show you how to model the switch because it needs an hour-long video of itself. I have a gather-on red switch that I've modeled a long time ago, and I'm just going to use that. What you can do is just search for a mechanical switch 3D model, and you can just download one for free easily. So I'm just going to go ahead and append the switch that I created myself which is right here, object, and hit A to select everything, append, and here is the switch. Let's just bring it up and make sure that it's in the right orientation. And then we can just bring it down where it should be. Make sure that the stem and the stem socket are aligned and they just fit perfectly like so. And the next thing we need for our miniature keyboard is a miniature metal plate. So I'm just going to spawn a plane, make this smaller, way smaller, and then bring it down. Let's go ahead and hit tab into edit mode and extrude this by 1 millimeter. And also select the corner edges like so, holding shift. And I can just go ahead and hit Control B and bevel them. Let's add smooth shading and let's look at it from the top. I think this would be a little bit way too big, so tab back into edit mode, A to select everything, S, Shift Z, and I'm just going to scale this down along the X and Y axis. And the next thing that I have to do is of course cut a hole in the middle of this. So let's just spawn a cube, make this smaller, and bring it down a little bit higher and hit tab into edit mode, SX, and I'm gonna scale our cube along the x-axis until we hit this curvature right here, and SY until we surpass the base of our switch like so. Then I'm just going to bring our cube down, make sure that it sticks out from the top and the bottom of the metal plate. With the cube selected, holding shift, select the metal plate and bool tool add-on and hit difference. Let's bring our metal plate up and see how it looks like. And I can say that I actually really like this. This looks pretty cute. And the last thing I need to do for our metal plate is beveling these sharp edges so it looks more natural. So hit tab back into edit mode. I'm going to hit 2 for edge selection. Holding Alt and Shift, I'm going to select all the edges and also these ones as well. Let's make sure that all of the edges around the top and bottom surface are selected, and then Control B and just bevel them like so. This looks pretty good. And the next thing we need is a tiny PCB. I have a picture here of the PCB of my own keyboard, and I'm just going to bring this into the Blender file so we can use it as a reference. So drag and drop into our Blender file, and it's huge. Let's reset the location and the rotation, and the shortcut for these are Alt G and Alt R. Let's scale this down. First thing I need to do is of course rotate this 90 degrees along the Z axis. Let's bring this down. I have a ruler in the reference photo, so we can just use that to scale the image. So let's go ahead and spawn a plane. And let's hit, let's say 200 millimeters or 20 centimeters. And we can just use this to scale our image. And just like that, you can see that we got the image scaled correctly. We don't need this plane anymore. Let's delete it. And also Alt G to reset the location of our reference photo. And I'm just going to spawn a plane and make it smaller and switch to the top view. Let's use this switch right here, which is kind of separated from the others. And I'm just going to make a tiny PCB the size of what you can see right here. So something like this would be pretty nice. I'm going to extrude our plane by, let's say, 0.5 millimeters, and also bevel the corners as well. So let's select these 4 corners and just bevel them a little bit. We can also add smooth shading, and this is our tiny PCB. We can also go ahead and change the name to PCB and also this plane to metal plate. So we are a bit more organized. The next thing I should do is, of course, punch these holes inside of the PCB. So let's select the PCB, Shift S, cursor to active, and let's spawn a cylinder. Let's switch to the top view, wireframe view, hit tab, enter edit mode. We don't need edge length anymore. Let's turn it off and I can just scale this down. I would also like to scale this down along the z-axis because this is ridiculous. And also I'm going to hit Shift D while being in the top view and just put this duplicate of the cylinder here. Hit tab, enter edit mode, S, Shift Z and scale this down, and hit tab back into object mode, Shift D and just put the duplicate right here. Shift D, put it right here because this PCB has 5 holes, and Shift D for the last one, and I'm just going to put it right here. And this is what we end up with. Let's hold Shift and select all of these cylinders and go to the Bool Tool add-on, and I'm going to hit Union. And with this object selected, I'm going to hold Shift and select the PCB and hit Difference. And we end up with something that looks like this. Let's close this panel and we can just use this image to texture our PCB. So let's go ahead and open up a new panel here. I'm going to switch this to shader editor and also material preview on this panel. Let's create a new material and I'm just going to go ahead and spawn an image texture, connect it to our base color, open the PCB image that I have right here. And this looks kind of funny. So let's hit tab, enter edit mode, switch to the top view and U project from view. Then I can just switch this panel to UV editor. Then I'm going to hit A to select everything in the UV editor and rotate this by 90 degrees. Let's just align these holes and scale down our UV and just make sure that texture is in the right place. And this is how it looks like. It looks pretty interesting, I can say. We don't need this reference image anymore, so let's go ahead and delete it. I can also select our PCB, hit Alt G and reset the location. So with our PCB, you can see that it fits perfectly with our switch, and this is our minuscule keyboard. Let's select the PCB and bring it down a little bit. We also don't need this panel anymore, so I'm just going to collapse it. And I'm just going to spawn a cube and make it way smaller. Bring it down and just put it where the RGB will be. This is where the RGB LED is on the PCB. Let's make this smaller and also bring it down. Something like this. Let's select the top surface and bring this down as well, so it looks something like this. And we're going to add emission to this object later so it lights up the escape key. With this object selected, I'm going to hold Shift and select the PCB, Control P object so they move together again. Now let's select the switch and the metal plate and bring them up where they should be. Somewhere around here would be fine, and also bring up the PCB where it should be. And the next thing we need to do is to just model a housing around everything so it actually looks like a miniature keyboard. So let's spawn a cube and make this real small. Bring this down. Let's switch to the solid view so we can see what's going on. I'm going to bring the cube further down. With the cube selected, I'm going to hit tab, enter edit mode, select the surface in the middle, hit I to intrude, and hit delete to delete this surface. Let's loop select these surfaces on the top and bring them down a little bit. And I can also hit 2 for edge selection, loop select the edges in the middle, SZ and scale them a little bit. I'm gonna hit 3 for surface selection and loop select the surfaces around the case by holding Alt and then S, Shift Z, and just scale them up a little bit. And also bring this up a little bit as well. Let's select the surface at the bottom and bring this up. Let's make sure that we are not going too further up. I would also like to make the housing a little bit bigger. So something like this, for example, would be pretty nice. Let's go ahead and select the corner edges and Control B and bevel them. Let's give this something like, I don't know, 14 segments and also smooth shading. And let's go ahead and loop select the edges around the top and the bottom surface, holding Alt and Shift, and also beveling those. 14 segments is definitely too much, so let's go with something like 7 segments, and this looks pretty cool. Let's go ahead and go to wireframe view and then the side view, and I'm just going to select all the bottom faces and just scale them along the X and Y axis so it makes a little bit more sense visually. And then I can just go ahead and add a solidify modifier to our housing with like a millimeter of thickness. Let's see how it looks like. Yeah, it's pretty good. Let's check even thickness and we can just go ahead and apply the solidify modifier. And I'm just going to go ahead and loop select these edges right here and go ahead and Control B, bevel these as well so it looks a little bit nicer. And I think this looks pretty cool. And finally, it's time to texture our objects, which is the exciting part of this tutorial. Let's just start with the housing. I'm going to change the name to case. I also switch the shading to material preview. Let's open a new panel here and change this to shader editor. I'm going to create a new material and change the name to case. Let's close this panel and make this a little bit bigger and zoom in a little bit. I'm going to bring up the metallic value to something like 0.8 and also the roughness value a little bit lower. Then I can add a texture coordinates node and also a noise texture and connect the object to the vector of the noise texture. Let's change the scale of the noise texture to 300, the detail to something like 15, and bring up the roughness value to 1. Let's spawn a bump node and we can connect the factor of the noise texture to the height and then the normal to the normal of the principal BSDF. Let's add an area light and bring it up. We can switch to rendered view and also switch the render engine to cycles and also GPU. I'm going to change the color to something much darker, something like this would be pretty fine. I'm also going to change the noise threshold to 0.01 in the viewport so I can actually see what's happening. Let's bring up the metallic value in the principal BSDF and change the roughness value to 0.2 so it looks a little bit more metallic. Now let's apply the same material to our keycap. Then I can just duplicate the material and change the name to keycap. Bring down the metallic value because it's plastic. I'm going to switch this panel to an image editor and just load this picture right here so we can pick the color for the orange. The base color of this material just goes to this orange right here. Let's open up the specular menu here and bring down the IOR level so it looks more plasticky. And I would also like to add a little bit of transmission so we can see through it. Maybe 0.5 would be good so we can actually see the insides and everything. Now let's bring up the keycap by, let's say, 30 millimeters and see what's going on underneath. Let's select this metal plate and I'm going to give it the same material as the case, but I'm going to duplicate this and change the name to metal plate and make the color a little bit lighter. Something like this would be pretty fine. Let's bring the metal plate up by, let's say, 20 millimeters and see how it looks like. I think it's a little bit too light. Let's make it a little bit darker. Let's bring the switch up by 20 millimeters as well so we can have access to these things. I'm going to select this object right here and find it in here, and we're going to call this RGB and create a new material. And for this, I'm going to start with a texture coordinates node and also a mapping node and connect the UV to the vector. We can make this panel a little bit bigger so we can see what we're doing. Next, I'm going to add a math node and connect the vector to the first value and change this value to 1. And we're going to change this add to truncated modulo, and then we can just move this a little bit to the right and also spawn a color ramp and then connect the value to the factor and open up emission on the principal BSDF and connect the color to the color of the emission. We can give this strength of 10 for now. That's definitely not enough. Let's give it 100. What I'm going to do is change the color of this stop on the color ramp to an absolute red and this one to an absolute red as well. And then I'm going to add a new stop and make this one an absolute green. And then a new stop, and this one is going to be an absolute blue. Let's zoom in a little bit and we can now play with this location of the mapping node, and as you can see, this is actually switching colors, which is really satisfying. Now, to make sure that everything's working perfectly, I'm gonna hold Control Shift and click on this math node. You need to have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled to be able to do this. And then also I'm gonna add a value node and just connect it to the scale and give this say 0.5. Now as I change the X location on the mapping node, you can see that we are having this constant changing of black to white, this gradient here, and this is exactly what we need. Now let's Control Shift click the principal BSDF so we can go back to the original preview. I'm also going to turn on the denoising in the viewport. I'm also going to change this panel to a timeline and close this panel so we can see what we're doing. Let's change the end frame to 200 and the first frame to 0 and the current frame to 0 as well. Then I'm going to input 0 on the location of our mapping node here and right click and insert keyframe. Then I'm going to go to frame 200 and give this something like 9000. Insert keyframe. And let's play the animation and see how it looks like. Is it slow? No, I don't think so. I think it looks actually pretty good. And that's it for the RGB animation. Now let's pause this and go back to frame 0. And I can just bring down the metal plate and the switch by -20 and also the keycap by -30. And the next thing we need to do is just apply a material to the text that we have right here. So let's add a new material and transmission goes all the way up. Roughness, something like 0.2. Let's switch to the top view. And as you can see, we can kind of see the light from underneath, but it's not good enough. I'm going to delete this area light that we have right here so we can exactly see what's going on. Now let's select our RGB module here. And I'm going to give the emission a strength of, let's say, 1,000,000. All right. and it still doesn't really show up like it should. So to fix this, I'm going to change this back to 100 and bring our keycap up again by 20 millimeters. As you can see, we can kind of see the color through this. I'm going to select the top part of the switch, and this is what we're going to do. We're going to expand this and add a mix shader and just put it right in the middle of these two. And then a light path node, put it right here. And then I'm going to connect is shadow ray to the factor of the mix shader, and also spawn a transparent BSDF and connect that to the second slot of the mix shader. And now the transparent part is actually letting out 100% of the light underneath it. We're going to do the same thing for this text right here. So the material output goes to the right. We're going to add a mix shader, connected in the middle, a light path node, and connect is shadow ray to factor, and also a simple transparent BSDF to the second slot. And we can bring this back down by minus 20 millimeters. And as you can see, we are getting a bit more light out of these transparent parts. Back to the RGB module, this 100 isn't really working out. Let's go with 1000. And we're starting to see some things. Let's change this to 10,000. The only thing we need to do is just give this a little bit more roughness and also enable auto shade smoothing so it looks something like this. I think roughness of 0.3 would get the job done pretty well. And this is looking pretty good. Let's play the animation and see how it looks like. Yeah, this is working out pretty good. But I just think 10,000 isn't enough. So back here, let's bring this to 100,000. And we're starting to see good results now. Now, all we need to do is just add a plane, bring it down so our miniature keyboard can sit on top of it. Let's shrink this panel down, and I can also add an environment texture. I have this Studio HDRI that I really like and I use frequently. But one thing that matters is that we need to get this shadow right. So let's bring this up a little bit, and I'm going to change the shader type to world. With our environment texture selected, I'm going to hit Ctrl T, and again you need to have Node Wrangler add-on for this to work. And I'm just going to rotate this along the Z axis until I get something that looks like this. I guess would be pretty fine. Let's select the plane on the bottom. Let's change the shader type back to object and create a new material for our plane. And all I need to do is just make this a little bit darker. So something like this. Maybe a little bit of metallic value. I'm also going to bring up the roughness so we don't see the direct light on our plane. I think the strength of the environment texture is a little bit too much. Let's bring this down to a 0.5. Let's collapse this panel and add a camera. I can go ahead and reset the rotation and also change the focal length to 100 millimeters. Bring this up, make this a lot smaller. This is huge. And I'm going to change this panel to 3D viewport and also view camera. And also close this panel and turn these off, and also change the resolution to 1080 by 1080 so we get a square aspect ratio. Let's rotate the camera by 90 degrees, and then I'm going to switch the transform pivot points to 3D cursor and rotate our camera like so. Maybe give this minus 45 degrees as well. Bring it down a little bit. Let's zoom in, and I'm going to switch this to rendered view. and this one to solid view and see how things look like. Let's make the RGB a little bit brighter, so we're back to 1 million for the strength, and we're now starting to see the effect much better. I don't really like the texture of the keycap. I think it has something to do with the specular value, so let's bring this back and give it a little bit of metallic and see how it looks like. I'm going to bring down the strength on the bump node to something like, I don't know, maybe 0.2. And this is starting to look more natural. Let's bring the saturation on the orange a little bit higher and a little bit more roughness. See how that turns out. That looks pretty good actually. I think I'm satisfied with that. With our plane at the bottom selected, let's just make this a little bit more lighter so we can actually see what's going on. To make this look a little bit more realistic, I'm going to bring the roughness down all the way so we can actually see the reflections on the plane, and also make it a little bit less darker so it looks something like this. And the one last thing to do is to select our text and bring up the roughness to something like 0.6. Let's see how it looks like. Yeah. We're giving it more roughness so it softens out the light that it emits. And I can say that this is the end result, and I'm pretty satisfied. So that's it for this tutorial. Thanks a lot for watching. If you made it this far, hope you learned something and enjoyed your time. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks a lot for watching. See you in the next videos.